Amen. Well, I took the liberty to decide how much we were going to cover today, at least is my hope. 'Cause I'm trying to finish up the book of 2 Samuel in early June. And so that's why the notes say from chapter 16 through the middle of chapter 18. Has everybody got notes? If not, it's Bob's fault. So, yeah. All right. Well, let's begin. We're in the middle of the story of the civil war led by David's son Absalom, who is the oldest surviving son and the crown prince. And where we left off at chapter 15, Absalom's pulled the trigger. Okay, we're going all in to take over. David, when he got the news, fled Jerusalem, went down into the valley, and is heading back up, about to cross over. If you can picture Jerusalem, if you're looking from the south toward me, Jerusalem is on a hill with steep slopes on either side. The lower part's known as the city of David, even to this day, and then it spreads out. So David fled down the hill, down to the brook Kidron, back up to the peak of the Judean mountains. Once you cross that, you're in the desert. And that's where we left off. Although also, if you remember from last week, we left off, David got the horrible news that his counselor and the wisest man in the kingdom has decided to throw in with Absalom. That was Ahithophel. And David prayed, "O Lord, please turn the counsel of Ahithophel into foolishness." And right after that, Hushai, who was also a counselor and David's kind of right-hand man, met him, and David said, "Go back. I need you to try to make this work." He's essentially a spy and a double agent or whatever. So that's where we left off, chapter 15. David is at a low point. He is fleeing the city with his closest supporters, but they're probably small, demoralized, and kind of a ragtag group fleeing in a hurry. So we pick up on chapter 16. Again, David's on the path fleeing the city. When David had passed a little beyond the summit, and he's just crossing over into the Judean desert on his way down to the Jordan, Ziba, the servant of Mephibosheth, met him. Remember, Mephibosheth was the only surviving son of Saul. Ziba met him with a couple of donkeys saddled, bearing 200 loaves of bread, 100 bunches of raisins, 100 of summer fruits, and a skin of wine. When you're fleeing for your life, you don't take time to pack lunch. So they were all just running. They had no supplies. So Ziba shows up with a whole bunch of supplies. Good on Ziba. The king said to Ziba, "Why have you brought these?" And Ziba answered, "The donkeys are for the king's household to ride on, the bread and summer fruit for the young men to eat, the wine for those who faint in the wilderness to drink." The king said, "And where is your master's son?" "Where is Mephibosheth?" he asks. Ziba said to the king, "Behold, he remains in Jerusalem. For he said, 'Today the house of Israel will give me back the kingdom of my father.'" Then the king said to Ziba, "Behold, all that belonged to Mephibosheth is now yours." Ziba said, "I pay homage. Let me ever find favor in your sight, my lord, the king." So a bit of backstory. So Ziba was under King Saul, previous administration, was sort of the master of his household. He's a big deal. He's like, coordinating probably herds and planting and managing resources. And then, of course, Saul is no longer king, and it's David. And so what does Ziba do during the first few years of David? He keeps running his empire only for himself and all his sons. And so Ziba is basically, the largest cattle rancher in the kingdom or something. And then David remembers his oath to Jonathan and says, "Is there any heirs of Saul left?" They either got killed by the Philistines or they got killed by David, which we'll read about later. And they said, "Oh, there's one, Mephibosheth. He's the son of Jonathan, but he's crippled." And that little note tells you he's not eligible to be king. He's not really a rival because you can't be crippled and be the king. It's just they're discriminated that way. And so David calls Mephibosheth back and says, you're basically a member of my household. You eat at my table. And, oh, by the way, Ziba now works for you. So Ziba went from being his own boss, managing this huge, empire, to back to where he was before, a servant to the family of Saul. So what almost everybody who looks at the scripture sees is Ziba sees an opportunity here to throw Mephibosheth under the bus and get his kingdom back. And so Ziba grabs as much stuff as he can, being smart enough to think David's probably going to come out of this okay. He throws in with David, so at least good on him for that. Grabs some donkeys, a bunch of supplies, and then we think lies about Mephibosheth and said, look, he said they're going to make me king again, which is extremely unlikely, and that's an understatement. I mean, first of all, he wasn't eligible to be king anyway because he's a cripple. And secondly, why would anybody want a crippled son of Saul over Absalom, who was big, beautiful, eloquent, and what everyone looked like should be a king? I mean, Absalom's going to be the king if it's not David, right? So Ziba throws Mephibosheth under the bus. David sort of like rashly and off the cuff. And you can imagine he's discouraged. He's wondering, is this the end of me? And then Ziba shows up with all this wonderful stuff. And he says, and he doesn't question the story. He just says, wow, okay, well, everything that belongs to him is now yours now. You got it all. And Ziba says, your humble servant. So that was that little episode. But this is sort of an episodic view, like David runs into this person, David runs into that person. So moving on here, verse 5. When David came to Bahurim, there came out a man of the family of the house of Saul, whose name was Shimei, the son of Gera. And as he came, he cursed continually, which is a violation of the law. You're not supposed to curse the king. And he threw stones at David and at all the servants of King David, and all the people and all the mighty men were on his right hand and on his left. And Shimei said as he cursed, get out, you man of blood, you worthless man. The Lord has avenged on you all the blood of the house of Saul, in whose place you have reigned. And the Lord has given the kingdom into the hand of your son Absalom. See, your evil is on you, for you are a man of blood. Well, that's pretty bold. I'm going to just read from the notes here because there's so many different little implications there. A second paragraph here. Because Shimei is not more specific, we cannot tell whether he's cursing David for his execution of the 7 members of the family of Saul at Gibeon. That's coming up. But again, the Bible sometimes isn't chronological. A lot of scholars think that actually already happened. Or is he saying David is guilty of the deaths of Abner, commander of the army of Israel, or Ishbaal, son of Saul, who was reigning? We read the stories there, and it was, Abner was Job's fault, and Ishbaal's was somebody else's fault. But still, common sentiment might have still thought David had something to do with it. Next sentence is, even possible that the public suspicion implicated David, who was attached to one of the Philistine armies that fought in the battle of Mount Gilboa in the deaths of Saul and Jonathan. So David was known to be serving in the Philistine army, and then lo and behold, the Philistines fight the Israelites, and Saul and Jonathan and the other 2 sons are all killed. Maybe they, didn't. The writer wrote for us the excuse for why David wasn't there, and he didn't want to be there, and he wasn't involved. But, it doesn't mean, popular suspicion wasn't still there. Now, we're going to get to the point. I'm going to jump ahead here because David is about to say, spare him. Don't kill him. And I didn't know this, so the third commentary I read said, Mordecai, Queen Esther's cousin and guardian, was descendant of Shimei. So because David spared him, we got Queen Esther. So that's a remarkable bit of history, and kind of related to that, because Saul spared Agag, king of the Ammonites, we got, I just blanked. Who was the one who tried to kill all the Jews in the story of Queen Esther? Haman. We got Haman. Because Saul spared Agag when he was supposed to kill him, we got Haman the bad guy. Because David spared Shimei when everyone else was telling him not to, we got Mordecai who raised Esther to be queens. So one of the things that you gain by frequent repetition of Bible reading is you start to make connections you haven't seen before. And I'm not saying I'm so smart. The commentator told me that, and I'm telling you. But you see how one piece of Scripture relates to another and blah, blah, blah. That's why I say I used to not like the genealogies at all. But now when I read them, there's always one or two little snippets in there that's a connection for me. And so I even now get things out of the genealogies, which I think are pretty cool. So let's continue. We're still in the story of Shimei cursing David. Oh, and by the way, Old Testament pronunciation, the secret to that is say it the way you think it should be pronounced with confidence, and almost no one will know better. So when we do Bible readings for morning prayer and there's like 18 names, I just blow through them and everyone's goes like, sounds good, yeah. Unless you have a Hebrew scholar in the room who'll be rolling their eyes like, that was horrible. So I don't know how to pronounce Shimei. I'm going with it. So, verse 9. Then Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, said to the king, why should this dead dog curse my lord the king? Let me go over and take off his head. The king said, what have I to do with you, you sons of Zeruiah? If he's cursing because the Lord has said to him, curse David, who then shall say, why have you done so? And David said to Abishai and to all his servants, behold, my own son seeks my life. How much more now may this Benjaminite? Leave him alone, let him curse, for the Lord has told him, it may be that the Lord will look on the wrong done to me, and that the Lord will repay me with good for his cursing today. So David and his men went on the road, while Shimei went along on the hillside opposite him, and cursed as he went, and threw stones at him, and flung dust. And the king and all the people who were with him arrived weary at the Jordan, and there he refreshed himself. So David said there's like two different reasons why you should not attack Shimei. Reason number one is maybe the Lord put him up to it. God knows I deserve it, so who's to argue? And again, David shows at this period in this episode to have a really good and humble attitude. And the second one is, look, my own son wants me dead. Anybody from the tribe of Benjamin, any family member of Saul, has way more reason to want me dead than my own son. So let's just leave him alone. We got bigger issues to deal with. And then he said, thirdly, there's a little bonus in here. It's like if this is unjust, maybe God will see it and bless me because of it. Did you ever think of that? If maybe you're going through a hardship in life and has nothing to do with you, and it's not your fault, and you're just struggling. And sometimes you can turn that into prayer. It's like, God, you know what's going on. Help me here. Or give me an extra crown in heaven when I get to heaven, because, I'm going through it. And that's what's on David's mind. Again, a very good and proper attitude to the whole episode. And lucky for Shimei, who doesn't die because of it. All right. Picking on to a new scene. Verse 15, Absalom entering Jerusalem. Now Absalom and all the people, the men of Israel, came to Jerusalem, and Ahithophel with him, the king's advisor. And when Hushai the Archite, David's friend, came to Absalom, Hushai said to Absalom, long live the king, long live the king. Now, Hushai has not been in on the conspiracy, and so Absalom's a little curious. What are you doing here? And Absalom said to Hushai, is this your loyalty to your friend? Why do you not go with your friends? They're all leaving. Hushai said to Absalom, no, for whom the Lord and this people and all the men of Israel have chosen, his I will be. And with him I will remain. And again, whom should I serve? Should it not be his son? As I have served your father, so I will serve you. That little exchange is just dripping with irony and double meaning. Everything Hushai says can mean the opposite of what it sounds like on the surface. So let's just walk through that. Hushai says, long live the king, long live the king. Well, what king is he thinking about? He's probably just praising David. Long live, he doesn't say it, long live King David. He's praising the true king in front of Absalom, who, interprets him, is he talking about himself, which he's not. And then Hushai said, no, for whom the Lord And this people and all the men of Israel chosen, his will I be. Well, he knows who the Lord has chosen. It's David. So he's appealing, a bit to Absalom's, ego, and Absalom's receiving to himself. But everything here, like I said, can mean the opposite of what he says. So there's the introduction. So now we're getting down to court business here, verse 20. Then Absalom said to Ahithophel, "Give your counsel, what shall we do?" Ahithophel said to Absalom, "Go into your father's concubines, whom he has left to keep the house, and all Israel will hear that you have made yourself a stench to your father, and the hands of all who are with you will be strengthened." So they pitched a tent for Absalom on the roof, just so everyone could know what was going on. And Absalom went into his father's concubines in the sight of all Israel. Now in those days, the counsel of Ahithophel was as if one consulted the word of God. So was all the counsel of Ahithophel esteemed, both by David and by Absalom. So, strategically, there is a interfamiliar fight. This is a family fight. I mean, the leaders of the various armies are cousins. And it's a father against son with cousins taking sides. It's a family fight. So you're an average person in Israel. You're just trying to keep your head low till it's all over. And you got the soldiers fighting. It's like, okay, but what if they cut a deal and they don't care if I live or die? And so some of the people may be thinking like this is all going to get settled in a couple days. But Ahithophel says no. Make it clear you're the king and there is no reconciliation. So in effectively adopting David's harem, there's all kinds of proprietary and image issues. And it's Ahithophel saying, make it clear that there's no going back. So everybody on our side will be strengthened and know there's no retreat. So that's what he advised, and that's what was done. And that fulfilled a prophecy of Nathan the prophet when David secretly sinned against Bathsheba, said, "You did this in secret. I'm going to give your wives to another, and they're going to do it in public." So this is a public humiliation for David, on the one hand. On the other hand, it's communicating to the supporters of Absalom, there is no return. This is a fight to the death. Yeah. I would think probably because, we have it recorded in the historic record what Nathan said to David. So it was remembered. And I'm pretty sure all through this, David's seeing the fulfillment of prophecy. So, clearly the author, the historian who recorded this, saw it. So it must have been discussed and known, I think.
On a macro basis, why do you think it goes in such detail about all of this? I mean, there's a purpose that is written in here in such detail, I think.
I can't speak to the specific detail, but you know how it is when you tell any story. There's certain details you remember. And this particular detail was a clear fulfillment of prophecy, so that's most likely why that particular one's in there.
We got to remember that Absalom started in his fury because of the rape of his sister,
Yeah.
which also reflected back on Bathsheba. So it's
Yeah.
a constant irritant,
Yeah. Yeah, there are refrains of sexual sin, of power, of lack of justice, all kind of throughout this. Well, let's pick up on in chapter 17, where the scene is still the court of the pretender, Absalom, and we're continuing with his seeking counsel. Verse 17, moreover, Ahithophel said to Absalom, so that was one bit of advice. Here's another bit of important advice from Ahithophel to Absalom. Ahithophel, again, Bathsheba's grandfather, who we think sided with Absalom because, an unreconciled, belief in David's wrong to his family. Moreover, Ahithophel said to Absalom, let me choose 12,000 men, and I will arise and pursue David tonight. I will come upon him while he was weary and discouraged and throw him into a panic. And all the people who are with him will flee. I will strike down only the king. And I will bring all the people back to you as a bride comes home to her husband. You seek the life of only one man, and all the people will be at peace. The advice seemed right in the eyes of Absalom and all the elders of Israel. Again, Ahithophel, known as the wisest man in the kingdom, whose advice was considered on God level, says, look, they're tired, they're discouraged, they're unprepared, they're unsupplied. Let's go immediately pounce on them, get the king, and this is over. So for those online, Michael's pointing out, just think about how much Absalom hated his father. And Ahithophel, recognized that and said, you only want the death of one man. You're not mad at anybody else here. Sometimes we lose sight of that. It's very disturbing to think about. So Ahithophel gives great advice, and his advice is about to be undone. Is it undone because it's bad advice? No, it's good advice. It's undone both through the agency of Hushai, who offers a different opinion. Hushai knows very well this would go horribly for David, and it's really good advice. So he has to craft some advice in a way that the king will find the alternative advice better. And so, again, we don't hear of Hushai again other than these two episodes, but these have to be some of the most brilliant turns of phrases in all of the Old Testament, I think. Verse 5. Then Absalom said, call Hushai the Archite also. Let us hear what he has to say. Let's get a second opinion. When Hushai came to Absalom, Absalom said to him, thus has Ahithophel spoken. Shall we do as he says? If not, you speak. Then Hushai said to Absalom, this time the counsel that Ahithophel has given is not good. Again, dripping with double meaning. This would be horrible for David if you do it. But he's trying to convince Absalom that it's not a good plan for him. Verse 8, Hushai said, you know that your father and his men are mighty men and that they are enraged, like a bear robbed of her cubs in the field. Besides, your father is an expert in war. He will not spend the night with the people. Behold, even now he has hidden himself in one of the pits or in some other place. And as soon as some of the people, well, so there is playing to Absalom's fears. I mean, David is noted as a famous warrior and a strategist. And yes, he's older now, and in one-on-one combat, he's not going to be that sharp. But he's an experienced commander. The people with him, essentially the professional army is with him. These are smart people, and they're mad right now. So that's playing to Absalom's fears. And as soon as some of the people fall at the first attack, whoever hears of it will say, there has been a slaughter among the people who follow Absalom. Then even the valiant men whose heart is like the heart of a lion will utterly melt with fear, for all Israel knows that your father is a mighty man, that those who are with him are valiant men. So again, and it's very common in ancient warfare, probably common today too, that emotions can rule the day, and sometimes emotions overrule reality. I mean, Absalom's going to have a much larger number of people with him, but if people see a few people die, then they get scared, and then all of a sudden they'll say like, oh, wow, it's going badly, and everyone's saying like, it's going badly. I'm actually reading for the second time Shelby Foote's History of the Civil War, which is absolutely brilliant. And in those early battles between the Union and the Confederates, the same thing happened. There's just an emotion takes over, like, oh, we're losing, everybody run. It's like you're thinking this is 19th century. Wouldn't it be smarter than that? No. Human nature is unchanged. Michael? That's good. Stonewall Jackson, never take counsel of your fears. And I have a theory why Stonewall Jackson died early in the war, because he was a God-fearing man, and he was he would have helped the South be way more successful and probably would have won Gettysburg. And God had a plan.
His own guy killed him.
Yeah, happens. Yeah. Yeah. What's that? Well, yeah, I know, and there were godly people on both sides who thought they were doing the right thing, but God has, a purpose in our individual lives. He also has a greater purpose, and the greater purpose was not for the South to win. I apologize if any of you think otherwise, but I believe that to be true. We can go down that rabbit hole. I mean, yes. My great grandfather, Colonel Henry C. Gilbert, commander of the 19th Michigan, was killed in Georgia, the Battle of Resaca. So, the only Southern victory on Sherman's march to Savannah. So, anyway, yeah, we're off. So, okay, back on. Emotions rule the battlefield sometimes, even when everything else should go in your favor. And Hushai takes that idea, which everybody knows, throws it in front of Absalom, and Absalom, another reason to be afraid. Now he's going to take a speech. Now that I've set you up to be afraid, now I'm going to appeal to your ego and turn. So the turn here is here, verse 11. But my counsel is that all Israel be gathered to you from Dan to Beersheba, as the sand by the sea for multitude, and that you go into battle in person. So we shall come upon him in some place where he is to be found. And we shall light upon him as the dew falls on the ground. And of him and all the men with him, not one will be left. If he withdraws into a city, then all Israel will bring ropes to that city. We shall drag it into the valley till not even a pebble is to be found there. So just appealing, we're going to grab so many people and we're just going to completely wipe them out, and the outcome's never going to be in question. Verse 14, and Absalom and all the men of Israel said, the counsel of Hushai the Archite is better than the counsel of Ahithophel, for the Lord had ordained to defeat the good counsel of Ahithophel, so that the Lord might bring harm upon Absalom. So, emotions sometimes lead to bad decisions, but sometimes God can just direct. In fact, he can anytime he wants to. And this time, God wanted them to be excited about Hushai's advice because that's what he wanted to do. And so they were excited about Hushai's advice and not Ahithophel's. Verse 15. Then Hushai said to Zadok and Abiathar, the priests, remember they were sent back to kind of spy and send word to David what was going on. Thus and so did Ahithophel counsel Absalom and the elders of Israel, and thus and so have I counseled. Now therefore send quickly and tell David, do not stay tonight at the fords of the wilderness, but by all means pass over to the other side of the Jordan River, lest the king and all the people who are with him be swallowed up. So Hushai said, I gave this counsel. They kind of liked it, but just to be safe, in case they do what Ahithophel says, you better get gone. Verse 17, now Jonathan and Ahimaaz were waiting at En-Rogel. These are the sons of the priests. A female servant was to go and tell them, and they would go and tell King David, for they were not to be seen entering the city. But a young man saw them and told Absalom, so both of them went quickly and came to the house of a man at Bahurim, who had a well in his courtyard, and they went down into it, and the woman took and spread a covering over the well's mouth and scattered grain on it, and nothing was known of it. When Absalom's servants came to the woman at the house, they said, where are Ahimaaz and Jonathan? And the woman said to them, they have gone over the brook of water. And when they had sought and could not find them, they returned to Jerusalem. After they had gone, the men came up out of the well and went and told David. They said to David, arise and go quickly over the water, for thus and so has Ahithophel counseled against you. Then David arose, and all the people who were with him, and they crossed the Jordan. By daybreak, not one was left who had not crossed the Jordan. When Ahithophel saw that his counsel was not followed, he saddled his donkey and went off home to his own city. He set his house in order and hanged himself. And he died and was buried in the tomb of his father. Ahithophel was not fooled. He knew he gave the right advice and he knew why. And when Hushai gave his advice, he knew it was all over from that moment. He knew once you gave David time to recover, once you gave David time to plan, once you gave David time to pick the battlefield and to set up your defense, even though Absalom would have more soldiers, David had the professional army and they had all the strategy. And I feel bad for Ahithophel. I didn't know him personally. Seems like a good guy. I sympathize that he was angry at David for the affair with his granddaughter and the death of his grandson-in-law, who he probably liked, and that David did wrong, and nothing, to Ahithophel's eyes, was ever done because of it. So I sympathize with all that. But
His grandson is going to become king.
right, yeah.
I mean, now, he doesn't know that.
He doesn't know that. That's a good point. Ahithophel's great-grandson becomes Israel's greatest or second greatest king, however you put it. So it's, I think life, we always have to try to discern between sometimes difficult choices. I mean, we've got the law. We know what is right. But we also need to rely on God's guidance. I think of anything. Think of a political election. This is hypothetical, no particular election. You got two selfish, power-hungry people who are each deeply flawed, running for the same office. Who do you vote for?
Better pray about it.
Yeah, pray about it. Yeah, I mean, yeah, you could say like nobody. I don't like either of them, but or the lesser of two evils, or well, I want to try to discern who God wants me to pray for. Michael, you want to say something?
Ahithophel's advice was called good, even by God, even though the advice was go murder your dad.
Yeah.
So it was a pragmatic, goodness, but it was very evil
Yeah.
in terms of the factual essence.
That's a good insight for those online. Michael said Ahithophel's advice was called good, even though, murdering the king was an evil action. It was good in that it was wise and politically expedient. But it was not the Lord's will. It was not the Lord's will for Absalom to be king. Absalom was no more worthy to be king. As much as David had made his critical errors and David, had majorly messed up, Absalom was no better and equally culpable. But sometimes we need to try to discern what does God want to do. And maybe Ahithophel, looking at this character study, should have at some point said, God, everything David does wrong, I hate him. What do you want me to do? And if he'd gone that position, maybe God would have said to him, David's not perfect, but he's the guy I want in charge.
But we don't have any evidence of Absalom being faithful to God.
No, and we do have the evidence of him killing his brother. So, let's say for sake of argument that Absalom is at least a cultural believer, because the whole people, they're cultural believers. David, we know, had a deep devotion to God. We can see that in the Psalms. So, anyway, a man after God's own heart, as he is described.
As you said, to put things in context with the Psalms, etc. Bishop Riah from Jerusalem wrote that when David left the city and went up into the hills, and that's where his supplies came, men came, and where he was able to rebound and grow at that point. That's why he believes that David wrote Psalm 122. I turn my eyes to the hills, and where is my help to come?
Yeah.
My help comes from the Lord.
Yeah.
So I think that puts together what you said last week and this week together.
Very good. For those online, Father Cass was pointing to Psalm 122 and as evidence, which the Bishop of Jerusalem said felt like he wrote as he was fleeing. My eyes looked to the hills, and the contrast between David's faith and Absalom's. We don't know his faith, but we don't see anything other than political maneuvering. David clearly is talking of the Lord. So let's pick up after the death of Ahithophel. We're in verse 24. Then David came to Mahanaim, and Absalom crossed the Jordan with all the men of Israel. Now Absalom had set Amasa over the army instead of Joab. Amasa was the son of a man named Ithra the Ishmaelites, who had married Abigail, the daughter of Nahash, sister of Zeruiah, Joab's mother. Zeruiah was David's aunt. And Israel and Absalom encamped in the land of Gilead. So, again, the commander of Absalom's army is a cousin of Joab, the commander of David's army, and also the nephew of David. So this is a family war. Verse 27, when David came to Mahanaim, Shobi, the son of Nahash, from Rabbah of the Ammonites, and Machir, the son of Amiel, from Lodabar, and Barzillai, the Gileadite, from Rogelim, brought beds, basins, and earthen vessels, wheat, barley, flour, parched grains, beans, and lentils, honey and curds, and sheep and cheese from the herd, for David and the people with him to eat, for they said, the people are hungry and weary and thirsty in the wilderness. Now these are powerful men, worthies, nobles in the region across the Jordan. They are not Israelites. And so you can see in this maybe hedging your bets or a win-win situation. If Absalom and David have a full-on civil war and Israel is weakened because of it, then that's good for the people on the other side of Jordan. They're non-Israelites. They'd be less threatened or controlled by the people of Israel. If, on the other hand, David comes back and wins, then he'll be really grateful to you. So that also is a bonus. So we see worthies outside of the people of Israel on the other side of Jordan supplying David. And again, a little bit of time's passed. I don't know if we're talking about a couple days, a few days. David and his supporters have had time to get over the shock. They have time to get some rest. They've had time to eat. They have had time to strategize. As Ahithophel counseled against, beating David now is going to be way harder. And as Hushai counseled in favor, to give his king, that is David, all the chance he could give him. So, I think we got time. We're going to go ahead and finish up with what I did notes on, which is just the first half of chapter 18. It's a pretty quick episode with a couple interesting details. So the war is now on. Verse 18, David mustered the men who were with him and set over them commanders of thousands and commanders of hundreds. They got time to get organized, time to lay out the chain of command, which may be a little different than, say, last year, because maybe some of the people he normally relied upon were with Absalom. Verse 2, and David sent out the army, 1/3 under the command of Joab, 1/3 under the command of Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, Joab's brother, 1/3 under the command of Ittai the Gittite. The king said to the men, I myself will also go with you. But the men said, you shall not go out, for if we flee, they will not care about us. If half of us die, they will not care about us. But you are worth 10,000 of us. Therefore it's better that you send us help from the city. The king said to them, whatever seems best to you, I will do. So the king stood at the side of the gate while all the army marched out by hundreds and by thousands. The king ordered Joab and Abishai and Ittai, deal gently for my sake with the young man Absalom. And all the people heard when the king gave orders to all the commanders about Absalom. Well, I said a little bit ago David was being really good. Well, here's not so good. Remember his whole weakness about his family, and you're sending all these people out to fight to their death, and he's saying, like, be nice to Absalom, which is the reason all these people are going to die. That's going to be in their minds a little bit. Verse 6. So the army went out into the field against Israel, and the battle was fought in the forest of Ephraim. So David set this out to be a battle in the forest. Now, if you're battling on the open plain, the army with the larger numbers has this clear advantage. If you're battling in the forest, that advantage is pretty much completely gone. Verse 7, and the men of Israel were defeated there by the servants of David, who were probably the more experienced professional soldiers. And the loss there was great on that day, 20,000 men. The battle spread over the face of all the country. The forest devoured more people that day than the sword. Not quite sure how, but you're kind of running, tripping. It's not like a walk in the park with neatly ordered trees. There's inclines, there's rocks, there's scrub. It's a jumble. It was a nightmare really for Absalom's army. Verse 9, and Absalom happened to meet the servants of David. Absalom was riding on his mule. The mule went under the thick branches of a great oak, and his head caught fast in the oak. He was suspended between heaven and earth, while the mule that was under him went on. So a lot has been made about this. I mean, the scriptural depiction is like he's maybe the mule's charging and he got tossed aside, and all of a sudden he got caught in like a Y in the branches, and he's like hanging there and somehow can't get out. Later historians like the idea of Absalom being caught in it by his hair, his luxurious locks. Scripture doesn't actually say that, but some people like to look at it that way. So, and I don't know why. Where were all his attendants? Usually if you're the king, you've got a bodyguard around you, right?
In the NLT version, it says his hair.
His hair. Yeah, well, that's not what the Hebrew says, but it says caught by his head. So where was his bodyguard? Maybe they had a fierce battle, and David's people overcame his bodyguard, and he was sort of fleeing by himself, and he got caught. Verse 10, and a certain man saw it and told Joab, behold, I saw Absalom hanging in an oak. Joab said to the man who told him, what, you saw him? Why then did you not strike him there to the ground? I would have been glad to give you 10 pieces of silver and a belt. But the man said to Joab, even if I felt in my hand the weight of 1,000 pieces of silver, I would not reach out my hand against the king's son. For in our hearing the king commanded you and Abishai and Ittai, for my sake protect the young man Absalom. On the other hand, if I had dealt treacherously against his life and there's nothing hidden from the king, then you yourself would have stood aloof. You can't argue against that point. It's like Joab says, why didn't you kill him? Well, I heard the king said be nice to Absalom, and if I had killed him, you would have thrown me under the bus. Joab did not dispute that point. He simply said, I will not waste time with this like you. He took 3 javelins in his hand, thrust him to the heart of Absalom. Joab went up with 3 javelins and skewered Absalom. But then, let's see, what verse, man? Oh, okay. While he was still alive in the oak. Verse 15, and 10 young men, Joab's armor bearers, surrounded Absalom, struck him, and killed him. So it was a platoon action. So we couldn't go back and say, oh, yeah, Joab killed your son. Joab was smart enough to know I'm not taking blame for this. He's also smart enough to know that Absalom has to die. If Absalom doesn't die, we're never getting over this. So he's politically calculating, but also knows the king is going to be really mad at anybody who killed Absalom. So he made it a platoon action. Then Joab blew the trumpet. The troops came back from pursuing Israel, for Joab restrained them. And they took Absalom and threw him into a great pit in the forest and raised over him a great heap of stones. And all Israel fled, everyone to his own home. Now Absalom in his lifetime had taken and set up for himself the pillar that is in the king's valley, for he said, I have no son to keep my name in remembrance. He called the pillar after his own name, and it is called Absalom's monument to this day. So Joab once again saves David, doing exactly the opposite of what David said he should do. But Joab interpreted that it was a necessary action and the correct action, and I'm siding with Joab on this one. So anyway, sorry, I've got to run. We have another service in 8 minutes and a baptism. So anyway, thank you.